What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with TechDaily, and in this video, we'll be doing a camera comparison test between the new Samsung Galaxy S20 5G and the iPhone 11. Now, I think this is a really interesting test because basically what you have here is Apple's least expensive phone versus Samsung's least expensive flagship, both still at vastly different price points and both offering significantly different hardware and software features that might affect how you take your pictures and videos. I have a ton of side-by-side picture and video samples to show you guys in all sorts of different conditions, and I'll get to that in just a minute. Feel free to skip ahead if you'd like, but I do want to take a minute to outline everything you get with these phones and some of the major differences you'll find in regards to the shooting capabilities, because there are some pretty important things to take into consideration. The iPhone, of course, has just two camera lenses around back to take advantage of. The primary lens is a 12 megapixel f1.8 aperture shooter with phase detection autofocus and optical image stabilization. The secondary lens is a 12 megapixel f2.4 aperture ultra wide angle, and that's it. There's no telephoto or any other sort of hardware assistance at all with the iPhone. The rest has to do with the software and internal specs that assist in taking pictures and videos. With the S20, you get a little more on the hardware side of things. There's three lenses here: a 12 megapixel f1.8 aperture main shooter with dual pixel phase detection autofocus and optical image stabilization, a 12 megapixel f2.2 aperture ultra wide lens, and an additional 64 megapixel f2.0 telephoto lens that also has PDAF and OIS. Now, I do want to take a moment to explain the advantages of an added telephoto lens on the S20, because there are a few that you might find useful. First and most obvious is with the zoom. The S20 has a hybrid optical zoom setup, which allows you to take advantage of the telephoto lens hardware to zoom in on pictures and videos. Having the additional physical telephoto lens allows for crisper, sharper zoomed in pictures and videos, because not only can it rely on the physical lens, but also the software, rather than just the software itself. You can also zoom in significantly more on the S20, up to 30 times because of the lens, while with the iPhone, you're limited to a simple 5 times digital zoom. In practice, the difference is night and day. With a 2 times zoom, you can already tell that the S20 retains a ton of detail, while the iPhone has started to already sacrifice in quality. At 5 times zoom, the iPhone has given it everything it has, but the picture has really been affected, even as something as obvious as the letters on Bellagio become hardly readable. And obviously, the S20 still has a lot more zoom left to go beyond 5 times. And while things start to look a little worse, of course, the S20 can at least say it has the option to do more. Another thing to consider is that the S20 can utilize the telephoto lens in its live focus shots too. The iPhone can still shoot great portrait pics while utilizing the standard and wide angles to interpret the background and yield that shallow depth of field look. But with the S20, you have sort of an either-or option. You can go with the wide angle or utilize the telephoto, and you can sort of decide which shooting option makes sense with the different scenes. Another feature the S20 has that the iPhone 11 does not is the ability to shoot in 8K. Now, you have some stipulations here. The size of these videos will be massive and take up a lot of space on your phone, and there's no image stabilization when shooting in 8K either. But Samsung is really pushing the limits here, like they always have when it comes to what a smartphone is capable of, and I can certainly at least respect that. One final thing to note before we start doing some comparisons: Samsung offers a lot more software add-ons, features, and filters and shooting modes that the iPhone doesn't have. Now, with these samples I'm about to show you, I didn't utilize anything in particular that wasn't already auto-enabled, but you might take these extra options into consideration when you decide which phone you prefer. Some of them improve lighting conditions, brighten colors, interpret the subject, and more. So they might be the added assistance you like in order to capture the best picture. So with the first image here, I think it's pretty interesting that in this instance, both these phones did a very similar job with the shot. To me, the iPhone seems to darken the shadows a bit, while the S20 really brightens up the horse and the rider. And because of that, I think we're getting more detail out of the S20, especially when you look close at the flowers. But the background looks pretty much the same, and overall, I personally think this is just a situation where the difference in images is a little tougher to find. Of course, that's not always the case, and in dim lighting conditions, we can see a huge variation in color temperature and exposure, certainly way more than I expected. I think once again, the biggest contributing factor here is the S20's propensity to brighten the scene while the iPhone isn't afraid to keep things dim. And in this instance, I'm going to give the edge to the S20 because just like before, the subject is better illuminated and there's less loss in detail. Also, the iPhone decided to go with a cooler blue tone and really went overboard with the fake sky ceiling for whatever reason. The white balance seems just a bit off. And we see these same sort of things with a wide angle shot too. The main differences being the exposure and color temperature and white balance, and overall, there's a better presentation of detail on the S20. Even when we move outside, I think we're still seeing the same tendencies I just talked about. And while I do personally think the S20 might be more pleasing to the eye with a brighter image, the iPhone in this instance is more accurate to how the scene was in real life. So in my opinion, if you're looking for a truer representation of the subject, the iPhone is more often than not going to give you that. But if you're looking for a brighter, more exposed image, the S20 can offer you that. Now, for nighttime shots, something I found really interesting was actually how well the iPhone did. I think in really dark situations, the iPhone actually comes out ahead for two reasons. One, it does a better job brightening the scene, which is strange given the S20's tendency to do more of that in regular shooting conditions. And two, the iPhone seems to be able to capture more detail. It's hard to explain just how dark this scene actually was. Each photo took about 4 or 5 seconds to take these pictures, so there's no doubt that their night mode capabilities are fantastic. But with the iPhone, I think it did a particularly good job. With the front-facing selfie cameras, this is probably where the S20 still has the hardest time competing with the iPhone for whatever reason. In standard shooting mode, the iPhone captures more detail with the wrinkles in my face and my stubble, and it doesn't seem to smooth out my skin as much as the S20 does. It's also better at interpreting skin tones. The S20 seems to give off this pinkish tone for whatever reason, which I don't think is how I actually look. When we go to portrait mode, I think once again, two things stand out. One, the iPhone missed the mark with finding the boundaries on my hair and separating that background. The S20 did a far better job, and that's very obvious. But still, the S20 once again loses out on detail and skin smoothing. And I think in this instance, it makes me look even more pink. Okay, enough talking. I have a bunch more side-by-side comparisons I want to show you guys, so I'm just going to let them play through for a bit here, and you can sort of analyze and critique them for yourself. Enjoy the pictures and videos. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll meet you back up at the end of this video. So there you go. I hope you guys found this comparison interesting and somewhat helpful. In the end, both of these phones take excellent pictures. There's no doubt about that. And they each sort of have their own strengths and weaknesses. I think it's really going to depend on what's important to you in regards to what phone you prefer. So let me know down below in the comments which device you'd be happy with. I'd love to know your thoughts, of course. Also, be sure to follow Tech Daily on Twitter and subscribe to the Tech Daily YouTube channel if you haven't already. And I'll see you guys later.